If you're squeamish, scenes from the operating theater. There's the incision. There's the spreader. Here's the first shot of the implant. Dr. Lear assisting. There's the implant. There's the metallic object. And there's Dr. Roger Lear and myself. Watch this. Here's the red-haired skull. We took the red hair back with us. There's a device called Raman spectroscopy. We had 4 hairs that we took. A normal human hair, a dyed human hair, the red hair from Paracas, and almost a white translucent hair that was taken from a person who was abducted by a hybrid and forced to have sex. As in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. The person was not. It does, in fact, offer a realistic explanation of how men and women will seek death but not find it in the last days. If this chip or implant can alter the DNA so that the body repairs itself and becomes disease-free, this would be extremely attractive to just about everyone. It would also make people like me, thought of as the backward imbecilic stooges who are impeding global progress by not agreeing to take the mark. Before you dismiss this, may I suggest you think again. Everything that I pointed out is happening now in real time. What can you point to that isn't manifesting right now? What scenario would you point to that would provide an answer to the scripture that tells us that men and women will seek death but not find it? One last time I point to Revelation 14, verse 9, that anyone who receives the mark will drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is prepared unmixed in the cup of his anger. They will have no rest day or night. Those who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. There may be more to this passage than what meets the eye. This mark, as I have pointed out, may change the very fabric of what is human by manipulating the DNA to extend the lifespan. Another point to consider is that it may result in creating a hybrid of sorts. In other words, those who take the mark may in fact become NEPHILIM, which is why the judgment is severe and final, just the way it was in the days of Noah with the flood and also afterward. Gauss meters and all this other stuff, proving, and then we find it, that there's an implant. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell except the one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. That's the one we all understand, right? But get this. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in the image and receives a mark on the forehead of his hand, skip down. He will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb. You take the mark, you wind up in the lake of fire. No grace, no mercy. What happens? What's the mandate? Back in with Joshua and Caleb, what's the mandate? What happens to the Nephilim? Wipe them all out. What happens to a person who takes the mark? Is there any second chance? Is there any, no. You're in the lake of fire. Why is that? Why is that? We know buy, sell, or trade, right? But then you take the mark and you're in the lake of fire. In those days, what days? The days of the mark. Men and women will seek death but not find it. Is that metaphor? Is that allegory? Or is it real? It's real. So how does that work? What if, like in the days of Noah, the lifespan is lengthened, isn't it? It's 500, 600, 900 years old. What if they show up and they give you this little DNA upgrade? Because remember, we're all good Darwinists, right? And we don't know where we really come from. And this little implant will change my DNA, and I'll get to live 500 years without any problems, okay? As in the days of Noah, the lifespan is lengthened. Something or someone is coming. This is the right presentation. Jesus, men faint from fear from what is coming on the earth. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. Paul, even the elect would be deceived, if that were possible, Yeshua, Jesus. Because they did not believe the truth, God sends them strong delusion. Paul, Jesus, it will be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. Why the dire warnings? From Paul and Yeshua. Why the dire warnings? And why is the church, for the most part, not able to look at it and pretend it really didn't say what it says? Let's move on. Genesis 6. When men began to increase in number on the earth and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God Saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever. He is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them. The exact term, B'nai Elohim, is used in Genesis, but it's also used in Job. I'm only going to pick one, and you'll get what I mean. Some people are taught the Sethite theory, that the godly line of Seth marries the hoochie mamas of Cain. That doesn't work, and it doesn't work because of this. Now there was a day when the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan was among them. That's in the third heaven. The sons of Seth can't get a catapult and jump on the catapult and somehow find themselves in the third heaven. The Bible is the best interpretation of itself, and I think, and I could belabor this, but I won't. I've got to move on. Bottom line is, sons of God always refers to the angelic host, and it's the unthinkable. It's the fallen host of heaven having sex with the mortal women of earth and creating this hybrid being called the Nephilim. Out of the entire Tanakh that Jesus could point to, he points back to the days of Noah, saying it'll be like this when I come back. And if we don't understand that, when we come to Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21, we're clueless because we've never really figured out what's going on in Genesis 6. Woo, slide 9. You go. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Moses is writing this, 1,000 years after the flood? So why didn't he just write the Nephilim were on the earth, period? There is no afterward. He's 1,000 years after. Get what I mean? Well, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days of the flood, period. End of story. No, he writes, and also afterward. Second, third, fourth, fifth incursion. It's my hypothesis, and I base my books and everything I do on this, that there is a breeding program going on between the fallen angelic host of heaven and the women of earth. Why? Because the fallen one, Satan, wants to create man in his own image. That's what's going on here, the great imitator. So now we come up into Numbers 13:33. The spies were sent in. Who's in the land? All these different Nephilim tribes. I could spend 2 hours on this. I can't. The bottom line is we get a mandate from a loving, holy God. Wipe them all out, burn everything, kill them all. That's genocide. Hello? There's no way we can tap dance around it. It is genocide unless there's something else going on in the Levant or the Promised Land. And that something else, there are hybrid beings that are there. Why? Because Scripture tells us. Who was in there? Oh, we saw the Nephilim in there. We were like grasshoppers in their sight. Wah! That's what the spies say. So that whole generation dies off 40 years, and then Joshua and Caleb, they go in and they conquer. I believe, that there was a diaspora as they went in and started to conquer the area. The giants, the Nephilim, and there were different tribes, the Emim, the Zanzumims, the Raphaim, the Anakim. They began to go, we got to get out of here. And there was a diaspora. They left the Levant. Some went northward into Europe, over to the Americas, settled down in the Ohio Valley. Others just, I'm dead serious here, dead serious. And we'll show you photographs later. Others wound up in Peru, others wound up in the Gulf of Mexico. But I digress and I must move on. 3,500 years ago, these guys show up in Paracas, Peru. We have that large skull cast that we have in the back table. That's the guy on the left there. He's got reddish hair. 3,500 years ago, this mysterious Paracas people show up in Paracas, Peru, on the west coast of Peru, out of nowhere. No one knows where they come from or why they just suddenly left. It's a mystery. They all have many of them have elongated skulls. Now, scholars and the prevailing paradigm will tell us all these elongated skulls are the result of cradle headboarding. What if they're not? And that's what we're going to share. What if they're not? What if this is a remnant of a Nephilim tribe? One of the Nephilim tribes is called the long necks. In my opinion, the fallen one is messing with the genome, constantly trying to find the right recipe to create mankind in his own image. Why? Because we're told back in Genesis, your seed and his seed will be at enmity with one another. I'm not making this stuff up. Let's move on. Look at this guy because we took hair from him. We took several hairs that fell out in the display case. And the curator of the museum, Senior One, allowed us to take care. Remember that. So we're down there and we see this elongated skull. It's a mummy. It comes from a graveyard called the Chongos Necropolis. and it's of a baby, and it's elongated. So we got permission from the curator, Senior Juan Navarro, to unwrap it, which was unprecedented. So the next scene you'll see is Joe Taylor from the Mount Blanco Museum and Aaron Junkins, the archaeologist that we hired to go down with us, and they are now unwrapping the skull. Look at the colors and how vibrant they are. There are between 450 and 550 threads per square inch. European tapestries, 150 to 250. Where did they learn this? Oh, and by the way, it's reversible. Where did they learn this technique? Who taught it to them? As we began to unwrap the skull, we began to realize that something was very, very strange. And you'll notice the hair is strawberry blonde. The hair is strawberry blonde. That's not supposed to be there. This comes from an 1842 journal. This debate has been raging since then. So it's well over, getting close to 170 years, whatever. Oh, it's all cranial deformation. It's deliberate cradle headboarding. They took the infants, they wrapped some stuff around it, and as the child grew, they created a cone head. Okay, fine. Some of them are like that. We acknowledge that, but not all of them are. And some guys, why should we care about this, LA? I'll get there. You'll see how it's all connected, because this goes back to the days of Noah. If these are Nephilim, then it can prove the biblical narrative. Listen to what this says. We ourselves have observed the same fact in many mummies of children of tender age who, although they had claws about them, were yet without any vestige or appearance of pressure of the cranium. More still, the same formation of the head presents itself in children yet unborn. And of this truth we had convincing proof in the sight of a fetus enclosed in the womb of a mummy of a pregnant woman, which we found in a cave of Wachai, 2 leagues from Tarma, in which it is this moment in our collection. Basically, this is what it looked like. Remember, in 1842, there's no photography, so they would hire someone that would come with them and sketch everything. This is a 7-month-old fetus found in the mummy of a pregnant woman. And the skull is elongated and it has teeth. That's not supposed to be there. This guy who wrote this in 1842 had no Nephilim dog in the hunt like I do. What did he care? He didn't even know about him, more than likely. And he's saying, wait a minute, guys. There's an outside agency, these are my words. There's an outside agency manipulating the genome. What is that outside agency? If you turn on the History Channel, it's the ancient aliens. It's the UFO guys. Right? Giorgio Tsoukalos, the guy with all the hair. But if we hold to a biblical paradigm like we all do in this room, it points back to the Genesis 6 incursion and also afterwards. And now we begin to realize that there is a cosmic chess match between the fallen angels and the women of earth, and that their seed and the seed of the woman are at enmity with one another. 4 years ago, the late Lloyd Pye took DNA samples illegally out of the country. You can't take any human remains out. We didn't know. He didn't know. I've never met Lloyd Pye. But I've talked to this geneticist many times on the phone. He is now waiting for our samples. We've got about 15 of them down in Peru, and we're trying desperately to get them out. The latest report is this, that the abstract paper was finished. It's now being presented to our Peruvian archaeologists, who will then present it to the Minister of Culture, who will say yes or no. It's just incredibly whimsical. So you could pray that the answer will be yes. And we will fly down there, we will take these samples out, and we will get them tested. But here's the deal. He had a little bit of sample to go with. This went viral when Brian Forrester, a colleague, put this up on his Facebook. Listen to what it says, Paige. Whatever the sample labeled 3A has come from, it had mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any human, primate, or animal known so far. The data is still very sketchy, though a lot of sequencing needs to be done to recover the complete mitochondrial DNA sequence. But a few fragments I was able to sequence from the sample indicate that if these mutations will hold, we are dealing with a new human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. I am not sure it will even fit into the known evolutionary tree. Isn't it wonderful that I'm tag teaming with our last speaker? Just incredible. The question is, if they were so different they could not interbreed with humans, breeding within their small population, they may have degenerated due to inbreeding. That would explain buried children. They were either low or not viable. This guy's Russian, and I'm giving you exactly the email that I received from him. I've talked to him many times on the phone. There's another sample which he has tested. I can tell you this, same thing. Mitochondrial DNA preliminary testing. Oh my gosh, there's nothing in our database. We have no idea what we're looking. Why am I so excited by this? Because for me, it points me back to the biblical narrative and proves, not conclusively, but we're getting there. It proves that something happened in the Levant, and it proves the biblical narrative. And if the biblical narrative is right, Darwinism can't possibly be right. See where it's going? This is why it's so vital. When we get the samples out, and I believe we will test them, we will hold a press conference in Dallas, and then we'll, of course, be torn apart by the media and the naysayers. Well, the samples were contaminated, L.A. Thank you very much. Okay. Sure they were. Well, get down and get your own samples and prove it's wrong. He's really feisty. It happened here in the Americas. Well, it's preposterous. There's a cache of records in Catalina, which was found by the curator of the museum about 2 years ago now. I've heard about it and had to pay a $1,000 donation to the museum to go out and look at it. Hired a private plane because I wanted to get in the back of the island, see where Ralph Glidden, who's the primitive archaeologist who took these samples in the 1920s and 30s, he worked for the High Museum, which was later gobbled up by the Smithsonian Museum. So he's got no Nephilim dog in the hunt. He's employed. He's not trying to stage the photographs. For what reason? Later in life, fine, he made his museum. It was very macabre. I get all that. But not when these photographs were taken. These may be the only original photographs I have been able to find so far of what we would consider a giant, an 8.5 to 9 footer. Look at the skull, look at the adult with the elongated skull. That's not Native American. It's not supposed to be there. This is all that I found in the collection. I'm showing you this right now. Look at the one on the bottom here. That's a huge cone head, the child. Look at this. See the similarity in Peru. So we've got this in Peru, and we've got this in Catalina. But all we have is photographs. The question is, what happened to the skeletons? No one knows. They just disappear. Isn't that convenient? Why? Anything that goes against the Darwinian paradigm is immediately dealt with. Immediately dealt with. Darwinism is sacrosanct in both academia and the scientific community. If you don't hold to a Darwinian paradigm, you don't go anywhere. Don't believe me? Watch the movie Expelled, Ben Stein's movie. How many people have seen that movie? For those of you who haven't, shame on you. Go out and rent it. But seriously, go out and rent it. It's an unbelievable education because he just slams Darwinism, and I don't have time to sit here too long. This was the smoking gun, and it's like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm sitting there, in this archive. In the back room, just a curator and myself. We've got 2 tables with white paper on them. My camera's set up on a tripod. I'm going through all the photographs. This is 1928, Ralph Glidden, Catalina Island. Ralph Glidden is 5'8". He's standing, and guess what's in front of him? A unearthed skeleton. It's a skeleton what we call in situ. It is not, this is the way he found it. It was placed this way, now he's found it. So you say, well, why do we care? Watch. This is the original photograph. I sent this picture on my blog. I had 4 people respond. Now I've got a quadruple blind study. 3 of them finished the study. I've got a triple blind study going with people who can take a photograph and based on a height, Ralph Glidden, the 5'8", they can extrapolate the size of the skeleton. None of them knew that the other ones were working on it. So I've got a triple blind study going. Guess what they all placed the skeleton at? You'll see. So here's the first picture. And we straighten Ralph Glidden up. And then we straighten the skeleton up, and it becomes incredibly apparent that we have a real disparity. We have an 8.5 footer, and that just is not supposed to be there. All 3 of them put it between 8.5 and 9 feet. I go with the conservative 8.5 because, I would much rather go with 9. 9 footer. You imagine an 8.5 footer? And you're a 5 foot, I'm 6 feet, so you're about this high, and somebody's 3.5 feet taller than you or whatever, or 3 feet taller than you. Can you imagine that? And they are also demonically enhanced, because that's what they would be. They would be hybrids. This is maybe the only photographic proof I've been able to find of an actual giant. There's a lot of hoaxes on the stuff. I'll tell you one other story. I showed this photograph to a colleague I didn't know it at the time. He had a production deal with a well-known channel, history channel, excuse me. And lo and behold, he has the photograph. Next thing I know, they fly him out to Catalina. This is my intellectual property. I'm the guy that found all this. So once I found out about that, I preempted it and just blasted it on my blog, sent it out to 6,000 people. And now it's mea culpa, we're all friends. I will be appearing on the History Channel's on Giants, Jim Vieri's show. We're going to Skype it next week. I have no idea what they'll do with it, but at least I'm there. At least I'm there. And I've talked to the producers because, LA, we really want you to weigh in on it because it's your photograph after all. So anyway, I remember Chuck years ago talking about the six-fingered thing when Native Americans would do this and they would raise their hand. The reason why they did this, and I've tracked this down based on what Chuck said, but I've talked to many Native Americans. Many of these giants who were red-haired, they were also cannibalistic. They also had 6 fingers. How many fingers do you guys see there? Count carefully. The thumb is underneath the arm. There are 6 fingers. That's not supposed to be there. And you see, when I showed this to the curator, I showed both of these photographs, the curator's going, oh, wow, I didn't see that. It's like their eyes, they're not looking for this, so they don't see it. Oh, that's just a normal skeleton. But wait, see the bowl next to this guy? That bowl's 6 inches. Why? Because the curator literally knows all of the 20,000 pieces or whatever it is in his museum. He knows them all. That's why he's a curator. He goes, yeah, that's a 6-inch bowl there. So the same, one of our gentlemen took the picture, took the bowl, took the 6-finger guy, and this is what we get. Just cut right to the chase here. Basically, you wind up with almost a 9-footer. So we've got 2 pictures, actually 3, that show skeletal anomalies, which, what does it point to? What hypothesis does it point to? It points to the Nephilim, leaving the Levant, fleeing the Levant, and settling the Americas. And when I've spoken to many different Native American tribes, they have this legend. It's all in their mythos, many of the tribes, of red-haired, cannibalistic giants that were there before them. The Great Circle Mound in Ohio, it's not built by Native Americans, in my opinion. It's huge, and it's astronomically aligned. And the Octagon Mound. Go online and search for this. We could spend an hour just on this. This is Marcia. And this is what they may have looked like in her opinion. So now I'm going to switch gears and completely freak you guys out. This is Bill's implant extraction, highest strangeness in the operating theater. What I'm trying to do here is I'm taking 2 completely disparate lines of thinking, and I'm going to merge them. In other words, what happened in antiquity in the days of Noah and also afterwards is now happening again in modernity. Well, that's absurd, LA. What kind of proof do you have? I'm glad you asked, because here it comes. This man was abducted by aliens, supposedly, when he was 4 or 5 years old.